As a fellow performer, I've got to say I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this genius rhythmic piece of urban street philosophy today. We're looking at abraxas' prologue. It's this deeply poetic text that just deserves so much respect for how it honors the author's gods and inner muses. We're going to trace the isolating, honestly agonizing journey of finding true purpose as a modern creator. In this explainer, we'll break down abraxas' mythic waltz. It's this massive internal and external struggle between his desperate need for solitary refinement and his undeniable desire to actually connect with humanity. It's literally a story of turning exhaustion into art, totally mirroring those classic mythic cycles of death and rebirth. So let's jump right in. See, abraxas isn't out here looking for some quiet, comfortable retreat. No way. He is actively craving friction. Just look at this quote. I must go away, too, into challenges. Where's my storm? I want thunder. That raw, foundational emotion right there, it completely captures this massive internal tension. He realizes that true creation just doesn't happen when you're resting. It needs a storm. It literally requires thunder. And this sets the stage for everything we're about to see. Abraxas is a creator who firmly believes that without immense struggle and really challenging environments, that spark of divine creation simply isn't going to ignite. Moving right into phase 1, the call of the desert. So this is where his mythic cycle really kicks off, and it's so much like Nietzsche's Zarathustra ascending his mountain for wisdom, right? Abraxas intentionally isolates himself at age 22, pulling away from his home arena and heading straight into the deserts. This is his period of profound isolation. It's where he's basically learning the mechanics of his own soul. But then, moving along the timeline to age 27, he knows he has to leave that desert behind. He transforms into this vibrant, roaring force, plunging headfirst into the chaotic city of lights. But his ultimate destination, that future state he's constantly striving for, he calls it the child. That represents a pure state of creation, a totally new beginning, and just a sacred yes to life. He goes from a lonely wanderer to a city roarer, all to finally become this pure dancing creator. It's a complete spiritual rebirth. Now, during that desert phase, he wasn't entirely alone. He actually had some very specific companions out there in the void. There's his spirit muse kitty cat named Ricarday, who acts as this whirling companion in the middle of his isolation. He also specifically talks about his interactions with spiders and scorpions out there in the black, silent aloneness. And, these critters weren't just background details, they were literally his desert teachers. Surrounded by the absolute harshest elements of nature and this crushing quiet, Abraxas had to face his own void. It was right there, right among the scorpions, that he learned how to dance internally, choreographing his internal waltz long before he ever braved the city. Which brings us to phase 2, descent into the city. As Abraxas leaves that quiet desert and drops down into the harsh, grimy chaos of the City of Lights, his whole perspective totally flips conventional ideas of good and evil upside down. On one side, you have the plebeian, or the lower man. This represents a conventional society that thinks comfort, mindless consumption, and this glossy uniformity are good, while they actively run away from heavy suffering. But the creator? He operates on a whole different level. Abraxas redefines what's good by actually embracing exhaustion. He commits to the dance, seeks this lightness of spirit, and is constantly breaking chains. He views the heavy lifting of the soul, basically all the stuff society labels as bad or tries to avoid, as the literal only path to godliness and true creation. Because to create something truly magnificent, Abraxas can't just skim the surface of life. He says, I dive below into the darkest dances, the abyss screams my name. The abyss isn't something he's afraid of, it's something he actively courts, because that friction is his fuel. This perfectly captures the profound psychological tension between his utter isolation and this massive gravitational pull toward the world. To make his art, he has to immerse himself in the darkest, grimiest parts of the city, and at the exact same time, the darkest parts of his own mind. All right, let's look at phase 3. Suffering as creative engine. Here we find the absolute core of his creative method. This is where physical pain and spiritual weariness become deliberate tools. It's a brutal but totally practical method for self-coaching and exhausting self-refinement. Step 1, squeeze and exhaust the self. He pushes his body out there on the concrete streets until his feet blister and his back cracks. Step 2, accept the suffering and the weather. He just takes in the cold and the pain, seeing it as an absolute necessity. And finally, step 3, transform into the child through dance.
He uses this intense physical exhaustion out in the city environment to completely bypass his analytical mind, which then fuels a massive spiritual artistic output. He is literally exhausting himself straight into enlightenment.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth does he put himself through this? Well, we have to look at the engine driving this whole waltz, the eternal return. Strongly echoing Nietzschean philosophy, specifically the book Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Abraxas views life as an endless loop, an engine of recycling. And because of this, the creator has to continuously overcome themselves. It's not just a one-time achievement. It mirrors our own personal quests for purpose. Dying in the spiritual and ego sense is a continuous requirement so he can constantly be reborn. This loop is exactly why he can never just stop and settle into being comfortable. Next step is Phase 4, the sacred street performance. So taking all this intense internal suffering and externalizing it brings us to a massive climax in his journey. The urban street corners become his primary stage, and it forces a huge question. What is his sacrifice, and is it actually worth it? As he dances through the city, he hits an absolute breaking point. He's mocked by onlookers, he wanders deeply fatigued into dark alleys, breaks spider webs, visits graveyards, and eventually, the sheer physical and mental toll lands him right in the emergency room of a hospital. It's this agonizing climax of a struggle. He's balancing his deep need for solitary refinement with this desperate desire to perform for and connect with humanity. He has literally given his entire body and mind to this waltz. And yet, picture this. He's sitting in that hospital ER, surrounded by confused nurses and the stark reality of his own physical collapse. And he delivers this triumphant, just soaring realization. He says, "I am dying. I'd love to suffer through toward a rainbow." Wow. This is the absolute peak of his commitment. He's totally acknowledging his complete depletion, but at the same time proving his unwavering dedication to turning urban struggle and immense visceral pain into godly beauty. To him, the hospital isn't a defeat. It's honestly just another stage in his sacred loop. So, how does he actually execute this art out in the world? Well, he bridges the gap between his isolated creator self and the everyday humanity he observes by turning the mundane into something magical. Street corners aren't just concrete, they are his altars for public performance. Dark alleys, those become his sites for tranquility and meditation. He even uses graveyards for cleansing rituals, kissing dead men in his mind to balance out the living and the dead. And a simple, grimy bus stop transforms into a place for profound spiritual rest at dawn. He takes the absolute grittiest parts of the city and uses them as his primary stage for enlightenment. And finally, Phase 5, the eternal rhythmic return. Everything we've talked about culminates in his ultimate thesis. This marks his final transformation from that lonely desert wanderer into a dynamic, creative force fueled by city exhaustion. He declares, dancing is not a performance, but alternatively a lifestyle. Abraxas realizes you can't just flip the creator mindset on and off like a switch. He shifts toward viewing his entire daily existence, every single step, every clack of his feet on the concrete, every random interaction, as a sacred waltz. The suffering, the joy, the exhaustion, the recovery. His daily life is the sacred performance. He's successfully managed to merge his internal philosophy with his external reality. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought, just from one performer to another. Look, we all face the noise, the chaos, and the deep fatigue of modern life. But looking at it through Abraxas' eyes, we have a choice. Will you let the daily exhaustion of the city crush you into that glossy uniformity? Or will you embrace the loop, lean into the friction, and use it to choreograph your own sacred waltz? Keep that in mind the next time you hit the pavement. Keep questioning, keep overcoming, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.